Welcome to SikhCast, brought to you by Sikh Research Institute, illuminating every path.
This episode of the SikhCast is from a live webinar that originally aired on August 21st, 2021.
Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Thank you for joining today's webinar hosted by the Sikh Research Institute. This webinar will begin with a 40-minute moderated discussion between our two panelists, after which we will have 40 minutes of Q&A from the audience. So please drop your questions in the chat box as the conversation goes on, and please be sure to include your name and city. Now I'd like to introduce you to today's panelists. First, we have Dr. Shimi Kang. She is an award-winning Harvard-trained psychiatrist, researcher, media expert, and international keynote speaker. She's a clinical associate professor at the University of British Columbia and the #1 best-selling author of The Dolphin Parent, The Self-Motivated Kid, and The Tech Solution, Creating Healthy Habits for Growing Up in a Digital World. Dr. Kang is most proud of receiving the Diamond Jubilee Medal for her years of outstanding community service and of being the mother of 3 awesome and exhausting children. And we have Ini Kaur. Ini Kaur is the creative director at the Sikh Research Institute. She has served SikhRI in several capacities since 2010, including chair of the board and most recently as CEO. She is a passionate author, poet, and artist. Her published works include Journey with the Gurus, a children's book series that is inspired by the life and teachings of Guru Nanak Sahib, Saki Time with Nani Ji, Thank You Vaheguru, Daddy's Turban, and The Story of Us. And unfortunately, due to a personal loss, Dr. Jasjeet Kaur will not be able to join us today, and we are sending her our best wishes during this time. Now I'll pass it on to Ini Kaur.
Thank you, Manvinder, for this wonderful and warm introduction and welcome. And Shimi, Dr. Kang, I must say, when Manvinder said 3 wonderful teenagers, and she said exhausting, I think I got that. Yes, they are wonderful, but they are exhausting, and you have 3 of them. So welcome to the show, Dr. Kang. We are privileged and honored to have someone like you be on the SikhRI's platform to talk about this very important topic. I can't tell you since the last 6 months or so the amount of calls that I have been receiving personally. Right. That, parents are very concerned. 2 things, about the screen time and also about mental health. So now that I have you as the expert, I'm going to pick your brain. So right off the bat, that's what I'm going to tell you, that's going to happen. But let's set the stage, what this is, what this conversation, and where am I going with this? In today's world, children have grown up with a vast array of electronic devices, and they are at their fingertips. I don't think the children can imagine a world without smartphones, tablets, and the internet. I mean, growing up, we had one black and white TV, which was only the programming was only for a certain amount of time, and that was it. Mm-hmm. One telephone for the house. So this is where we have come so far. And then now compounded that this past year, people of all ages, including myself, we have spent a significant more time living through our screen. And, in many cases, it's okay because it isn't a choice that we have, it's a necessity. Schools have gotten online, there's remote learning. I mean, all our work has gotten online. And I'm sure yours has also, to a significant extent, got on there. So there is recognition, yes, that is happening. But on the flip side, this advance in technology, I feel we are the first generation, the parents of this generation are the first generation who have to figure out how to limit this screen time for children. We don't know how to do it. We understand that digital devices can provide endless hours of entertainment and educational value. There's a flip side too. And this particular webinar, Dr. Kang, I must say, was pushed me to do this was because I recently read research from the Pew Research Center. They put out a report, and they said in the report it was like 63% of parents with school-age children are worried, about the screen time now than before the virus, and they're also worried about the children's ability to maintain friendship and social connections, and about their emotional well-being.
Mm-hmm.
So you are a physician, educator, and much more. What are the changes that you have seen and experienced in the last couple of years? And can you speak to that? So then, then I can ask you some deeper questions.
Yes, absolutely. And it is just a pleasure to be here with SikhRI, and thank you for all the wonderful work that the Sikh Research Institute does, and all your wonderful work as well, Inni. I actually have your painting. It's usually right behind me here, but I recently changed it because my children made me a painting for Mother's Day. But I've had your beautiful painting behind me when I've gone on the national news and I've gone on international news, and it's there for the world to see. And it's given me so much solace and confidence knowing I have the ick of God behind me, that was part of your work. So so screens, pandemic, kids, first off, I think I want to highlight my role as a mother. I have, just to kind of put it in frame, I have a 15-year-old son who's going into grade 11. He has ADHD and written output, a learning difference. And technology has been very interesting for him because on one hand, he needs it for executive functioning in his calendar and his alarm and all kinds of tools. But at the same time, and we know kids with ADHD and mental health issues are also more prone to screen addiction and getting in trouble with screens. So that's my oldest son. I have a middle son, Javer Singh, and he's turning 14 next week. And I have a daughter, Gia, who's 11, and she has dyslexia, actually. And so again, screens and Google Read and Write and dyslexia fonts have been vital to her education. So I think what I want to start with is this, we want to really be clear, not to be anti-tech. We want to understand that what I say, and in my research and in my book, The Tech Solution, I open up the first chapter and I say that technology is the fire of our time. What I mean by that is there was a moment in human history where when we were hunter-gatherers, we had learned to harness the power of fire. And those who taught their children how to do it well and did it well themselves went further and farther than ever before. And those who didn't got burnt and could have easily burnt down the village. And I say right now in our world, this is the fire of our time. This is such a powerful device, and it is. I really wanted to use that analogy so that we understand what we're dealing with. We're dealing with something that can leap us forward in progress and advancement and accessibility and equalization, and literally help solve some of the major issues that we're facing in humanity if we use it well in service of our health, happiness, and innovation and success. Or if we don't, what we know now is technology is linked to numerous things. So we know that it is linked, so this is correlated, not causing, linked to anxiety, depression, body image disturbance. Now, gender is not binary, but we know that the body image disturbance and the perfectionism is seen more in young girls and women. We know that screens are linked to myopia, meaning nearsightedness, so eyesight difficulties, obesity as well, sleep disturbance, and the most fundamental deficits in social skills, including the skill of empathy. We're seeing going down in young people because empathy is built when we look at each other, when we see each other, when we hear each other's voices. And so just the physical barrier of the screens is one aspect. And then there's the time that's being spent on screens. Prior to the pandemic, the average teenager was checking their phone 150 times a day, and spending 6 to 7 hours on devices that's outside of school or homework. So, the links here are across the board in terms of how it's impacting us. One I didn't even mention is addiction. So internet addiction disorder and gaming disorder are now medical diagnoses. These are, medical conditions, and the rates of loneliness have been going up in correlation with when the iPhone reached 50% household saturation, particularly in the United States. Scientists and researchers were able to track the rise in loneliness that correlated with that. And just to put it in context with what you said, it took about 35 to 40 years for the television to reach 50% of American households, and it took less than 8 years for the mobile phone to reach. So it was a very rapid disruption in our daily lives, a very rapid disruption in what the home life looked like, what the school life looks like. It's really not enough time, right, to adjust to this new thing. Many parents feel they've just been hit and are kind of in a daze and not really sure where to start with what I say is one of the most important issues of our time because of those links to mental health, addiction, loneliness, and so many other drawbacks that we have with tech.
I love the fire analogy. It kind of put things in perspective, because what you said was all of a sudden you understood it. Yes, this is the fire. Let's use it wisely. How do we use it? I love that. So thank you for that. But you brought about, you said your last sentence was parents they're in a daze, they don't know. But parenting, honestly, Dr. Kang, has gone through a dramatic change in the last, 15, 20 years. I don't know if it's just me, but today's world seems to be a lot more imbalanced. So in this imbalanced world where things are happening so rapidly, I mean, it is hard for a parent to keep track of, how do we raise a balanced child? I mean, honestly, I just got onto TikTok only because I needed to know what was happening, because people were talking about it. You've got to see, you work with children, you've got to be on that platform. And and I have been looking at that platform from a purely educational perspective. What is it? It seems to me, and I could be wrong, that it is all of a sudden we become this generation of attention seeking. That if we don't get that, or we seem to want that, it seems to be like I would call it like a drug that we need. Right? Whether it's good or bad, it's a different thing. But it's like something that we need, help. What do you think?
Right. Yeah. Well, I think you said exactly what it is, in the sense of, I'll give some of the science behind the drug. The drug really is our own neurochemistry. It is something called dopamine. And dopamine is a neurochemical reward that we get for short-term pleasure. So the way I explain it, and my background is as an addiction psychiatrist. So I've spent a lifetime understanding how the brain gets addicted and how to move it away from those habits. So motivation. And so the currency of our motivation is something called dopamine. And I say this is the sugar in our mind's diet, right? So we have a diet for our food, but we have a diet for our brain, our mind. And dopamine is a sugar, meaning it's not all bad. We do need little hits of pleasure. And, we get it from certain things. We get it from, let's say, hunting, competing, it feels good to win. So we get a little hit of dopamine. We get it from gathering behaviors, shopping, buying things, eating, little hits of dopamine, a little bit of chocolate cake tastes good. And superficial socializing as well, which is quite different than social bonding. So the dopamine is like the sugar. It is something that the human brain likes and needs small amounts of, in combination then with other healthy neurochemicals, and we'll get to those in a minute. But what's important in what you're saying is these devices are designed, there's something called persuasive design, which is the purposeful embedding of manipulation of human behavior to enhance how much dopamine is being released. So they're highly addictive without being a drug in that sense, but it is how it's releasing a very powerful drug in our own brains. And so it's very much, I say, an unfair fight in the sense we can't expect children to know how to manage these devices, because on one hand, it is the most sophisticated neuroscience known to humanity right now. That science is being used in these platforms and devices. And on the other hand, you have a young, immature brain that's not fully developed till 23 to 25. And so it's not a fair relationship. And that's why we see that pull that you talked about, it's a very powerful pull towards these devices where you almost feel compelled. And I think even many adults will agree about that addictive nature. And I think we want to really highlight that this is not we've never seen this before in human history. The only closest analogy is sugar, I think, in the food industry, where sugar has been used purposely to, enhance the palate or enhance the taste and to keep certain foods addictive and keep us coming back for more. That's what dopamine does. So, that's just a bit of the science. And I think I just want to put that out there so that people are not judging their kids or judging themselves and saying, wow, I'm such a bad parent. My kids are addicted, or there must be something wrong with me because I check my phone. This is part of the human hardwiring, and it's been researched and utilized for the benefit of technology. Now, I do want to say I don't think the tech companies had a big conspiracy to ruin a generation of kids, but they did have, they do want to sell their products, and like any industry wants to sell their products, and they found a way to do it. They found a way to keep people connected and keep the eyeballs on the screen. That, and also getting back to parenting in general, you're absolutely right. Parenting has changed. And actually in my first book, The Dolphin Parent, I really reviewed how parenting has changed in one generation. And I say it's a true paradox. As parents, we've never had such conveniences. We've never been able to just go to the grocery store and buy what we want and click things at the hit of a button. My parents certainly didn't have all of the conveniences I had. I'm the youngest of 5. My parents came from Punjab. My mom never went to school. She can't read any of my books because her reading level is low in Punjabi only. And what they had to go through to raise kids is so much more, I would say, stressful than I. However, the research shows that parenting is more stressful than ever before, partly because I say there's a paradox in our world, and we've really moved away from our balanced lifestyle. So, for example, almost 70% of young kids are chronically sleep deprived. And that's because they're too busy. That's because they're in too many activities. That's because, they're going to school, and then they have hockey, and then they're staying up at night on their screens, and then they're waking up and going to a tutor. So something so basic like sleep. And I say simple is not easy. So, my mom, who didn't go to Harvard or have the education, she knew that we all had to sleep on time, and even rituals, like we had to go to the Gurdwara on Sunday, and there was a a tradition there, and there was the benefit of the sangat and going together. Whereas now we know families are more disjointed. They're having dinner in the car. They're rushing to an activity. So we've seen a disintegration of the family unit and the community unit. That's one big thing we've noticed in parenting. That's why I use the metaphor of the dolphin. It was my effort to explain that we need to live in a community. We need to be socially bonded. We need to have intergenerational relationships. We need to play. Kids need to play, and really get back to all the basics of life. So parenting has changed in itself because our lifestyles have changed. And then on top of that, technology is got this very powerful pull for our children and ourselves as parents. So we as parents are also now more distracted, being pulled towards our phones.
Dr. Kang, you said something and I wrote it down. You said something like the brain is not developed till the age of 23 to 25, right? That's not the common understanding. I mean, we also get a lot of things, so mental health at 20, you feel that that the child is 18 and they know everything, right? But what you're saying, no, the brain is still developing at that time, and 23, 25. Speak to that, because that's new for me too.
Yes, absolutely. So I have my brains here. I keep all kinds of models, and so the human brain. If you can probably let me see where the lighting. There we go. That's probably pretty good. So it's an amazing thing, really, and we have what's unique about the human brain is we have this frontal area called our prefrontal cortex, and that's what makes us distinctly human. This is our higher level thinking. We call it the neocortex. But this entire region, which is responsible for things like risk management, impulse control, planning, delayed gratification, even empathy aspects, all of that start to go through a process in the tween years, starting around 12, and it continues until early 20s, where there's pruning and neurons are being wired and rewired, and it's a very complex process, but we know that doesn't really end the maturation aspect until early 20s, mid 20s, actually. Now, of course, gender is not binary, but we know in general that it could be around 23 for girls and women, and roughly a little bit later for boys and men. But those are generalizations. I think the key is that it continues on, and that's where I tell parents, if they have a 21-year-old, that you're not done. You're not done, and in fact, the human brain doesn't ever really finish. It's never complete. We have this wonderful thing called neuroplasticity, meaning we can always learn and change and develop new habits. But that's a really critical time. And we know that mental health issues are more likely to emerge between that age of 15 to 24. That's actually the highest risk period for mental health issues, is those very formative years, those very active years of brain maturation.
Well, we've had a few cases of within the community, of suicide, young suicides, and they're in that age range which you talk about, more on this with the 18 to the 21, 22. Yeah, and these were amazing, stars of the community, and very, as far as we could tell, very much out there. So I guess the pressure of being the role models, and and the loneliness that goes with that as well. So what advice would you give? Every parent that was listening, and I'm also very much there, is like, what are the things that we need as parents or caregivers to watch out for when there's a behavior change in our child?
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. So, I think we first have to recognize that this is common. 1 in 4 people on the planet, have mental health, a diagnosable mental health issue. And, regardless of, culture, gender, socioeconomic category. In fact, we see sometimes, like you said, these stars are more prone because of the pressure to perform and perfectionism. And technology also fits into that because social media is a place of comparing your life to others, and you see others' fake filtered life, and you think yours isn't enough. So that certainly contributes, like I said, and that long list of all of the things, anxiety, depression, addiction, are linked, correlated with technology use. So, I think some basic things for families and parents is, like you said, a change in behavior, and a change in some really basic stuff, sleep. If we're seeing a change in sleep, we're seeing a change in social connection, wanting to withdraw, a change in their interests and levels of activity. So if they used to play soccer, they don't want to play soccer anymore. And more of a draw to technology is part of that, because we know that the people who are more likely to get addicted to technology are more likely to actually have depression, underlying depression, anxiety, or some kind of mental health issue as well. And I think I always tell families to trust their intuition. It just, sometimes there's nothing that's really clear, but you just have a feeling, you think, maybe there's something going on with my child. And I think that's really important, to just trust that, understand that. That's that inner voice, that's why we need to have quiet and slow and mindfulness and meditate and do our bod, because that's when we can tap into that intelligence and that intuition, which is a science, by the way. We can look at our child's face, and our mirror neurons and aspects of our brain are processing what we're seeing. And it tells us information that, oh, maybe something isn't right. And you're not sure. There's no specific thing that you could say. You just know, because you're paying attention and you're listening, and you're listening to your intuition, you're observing. And then I think the other thing is an increase in substance use as well. So alcohol, drugs, vaping, all of this also went up during the pandemic, along with screen time went up in the pandemic. What I call, these are behaviors that are part of the flight response of stress. So when we get stressed, we have freeze, fight, or flight. Freeze is anxiety, perfectionism, procrastination. It's like the little blue circle in the computer going around and around. That's more freeze. Fight, we get irritable, we get angry. And flight, we want to mentally escape, right? We want to fly away like a bird in nature. But we do that through our phones, through eating, through online shopping, through social media, through alcohol and substances, any kind of flight, watching Netflix too much. I do that all the time. So all of those behaviors have increased during the pandemic as well.
Yeah, I'm going to take a question here. Is it awesome information from Dr. Kang? Can you share some tangible pieces of what families can do to help balance screen for pleasure versus learning, especially for learning diverse students?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm going to share my screen and show a slide that I hope will help. Very practical, in a very practical way. Hold on. Here we go. So I think you can see something called the Tech Solution Plate. Let's show it full screen here. Right. So what I thought, a good way for us to understand screens consumption, technology consumption, just like how we understand food. And we teach young people at a very early age what's healthy food, what's junk food, what's the food to avoid. Well, we can do the same with technology. So, the dopamine I mentioned, that's what we would call junk tech. Okay, that is not. It's like junk food. A little bit is okay. A little bit of dessert, a little bit after you've had the healthy stuff. So we want to be careful of mindless entertainment. Nothing wrong with gaming or social media, but just that mindless scrolling, zoning out. It's like eating a bag of chips. No real nutritional value. A lot of empty calories there. We want kids to consume healthy tech, and that's tech that can lead to self-care, So, exercise, sleep, Fitbits, there's so much positives on tech. I'm working on an app called Get Sparky, which teaches mindfulness, connection, critical thinking, creativity through tech. So, we know that tech can be very positive. It can lead to meaningful social connections, just like this call today, this webinar, and FaceTiming grandparents. Tech can lead to creativity. So creating photography, music, coding, instead of kind of mindlessly watching, let's say, someone else's TikTok video. So this is what we would say is healthy tech that leads to self-care, connection, and creativity. The neurochemicals here are endorphin, oxytocin, serotonin. We don't need to know those, but I do want to just say this is very much grounded in science, in neuroscience. And we want to avoid toxic tech. That's any tech that leads to cortisol or stress. So this is tech that promotes addictive behaviors, this fear of missing out, FOMO that kids talk about, comparing your life to others. Of course, bullying, cyberbullying has gone up in the pandemic. Some studies report 800%. And hidden stressors, I say, are even just sitting for long periods of time. So, this metaphor, I'm hoping, like the food, is something that is familiar to parents, is something that we already know. So, we can just take what we know and say, all right, we teach kids about food. Let's put the same paradigm in, and we know that we have to start early, do it frequently. It's not just one conversation, it's multiple conversations. And then when they're teenagers, they eat more junk food, but you have to have faith that the foundations are there. So, I think that's in one way, a practical way of looking at it. I think that the question was about neurodiverse. So you have to be even more careful with neurodiverse, because like I said, my two children who are neurodiverse, they rely on tech more. And so on one hand, they're also more at risk. So it's not about screen time. We have to go further. We have to go further and think of screen quality, screen consumption. What are the ingredients? How do we differentiate these three types of tech? So I hope that kind of metaphor there, the plate and the diet, can be helpful for people.
Yep. Well, having that food plate makes a lot of sense. You don't go for the dessert first. You go for, the healthy stuff, which is the foundation, and a little bit of dessert. But you mentioned something about cyberbullying, and, I'm recalling in the last 3 months, I've had about, I would say, 5 calls from distraught parents that virtually saying, but they are home all the time, and yet how is this happening? And it's a case of where we as parents thought just because the children are at home, they're safe. But that's not the case.
Right. No, not at all. Not at all. So first of all, cyberbullying, I believe it depends on the study, but some studies say between 40 and 60% of children and young people will say they've experienced it. Many say they've actually experienced it more likely from their own friend group. And also the science shows that it's just as distressing as real bullying, in the sense, even though there is no physical, no one's being pinned against the locker, like when we think of the bully, but the impact in terms of cortisol and stress hormones and the psychological impact is exactly the same, if not more, than, let's say, in-person bullying. So this is a very real thing, and bullying is also linked to anxiety, depression, addiction, behaviors, trauma, post-traumatic stress disorder, and I see that in my practice a lot. The studies are up to 800% increase in cyberbullying, with increased anti-Asian, anti-Indigenous, Islamophobic, anti-Black, anti-LGBTQ. Like there's, all of, we've seen upticks in that, and a lot more hate online as well. So this is a conversation every parent needs to have with their child. I would say every parent should ask their child, I hate to say it, not if, but when you might see this, either directed at yourself or someone else, what do you do? And so there's a couple of things that you can do. One I say is called cyber backing. So if it's a mean comment, and you can feel free to put out positivity. You can put you can, if, let's say someone posted a picture and there's a bunch of mean comments, you can say, I think that's a nice picture, or you look great. So, you could use yourself, your energy to try to change the tide. So that's cyber backing. Sometimes, and especially for younger kids, I say you do nothing, because they need guidance. And so, it's better to have no presence, and then tell a trusted adult, like a teacher or a parent, to manage it. If you're the victim of it and it's coming repeatedly, you actually want to take a screenshot. You want some evidence of what has been coming your way, because a lot of times it can be denied, and especially things like Snapchat, which have a 24-hour and then they're gone. So you do want to do that, if that's important. And again, talk to a trusted adult. Or and in many schools now, they're having policies for it. And that's a bit gray, because if it's done at home, schools are like, well, it's not really our responsibility. But let's say it's regarding a school event, it's a basketball game or something, then it does become school responsibility. So, kind of understanding the parameters around that. And I would say that, and then there's controls, right? So you can block certain people, you can limit, incoming messages from certain people. You can get off social media, just take a break from it, which I think is a really good option for a lot of people. I myself took a summer, this last summer, which is interesting because, I have a book on technology that's out there right now, and it's in Costco and different stores, and I'm supposed to be taking pictures. And I kind of took a break myself for the last 2 months in terms of posting. And it's just a healthy thing to do, because we can't always be on. And I think kids do feel they always have to be on, and not, maybe if it's not even bullying, it's just being polite. I had a young girl in my practice who was spending 2-3 hours a day just liking and commenting on her friends, because she was just trying to be polite to all the people in her life, but it was taking her an extraordinary amount of time, and was leading, to burnout and stress. So, this, I think the topic, getting back to the cyberbullying, is one every parent wants to have with their child, and also understand what are the school policies, and what are some steps I can take to help my child when they come across it.
Yeah, you said something really interesting about you taking time off from your social media for 2 months. I've done the same thing. I've said, I don't need to post. I've been really off it for about 3.5 months, so much so that I got so many messages. Are you okay? Because I would post something something in the morning and then something at night before going to bed. And then now it's rarely I post that. So, children model behaviors that they see around them. So, if parents and caregivers are constantly on their devices, or have the television and the background at home all the time, what advice now would you give to the parents?
Right. Yes, absolutely. Well, we know that children are more influenced by what we do than what we say, even though we want to say all the right things. Sadly or stressfully, it's what we do that makes more of an impact. So our role modeling is absolutely key. But that doesn't mean we can never go on our phones in front of our children. That's not realistic. So, what I say is, have the conversation and tell them. So, I'll give an example. Like if I'm at, the other day, I was in a parking lot, and my son went to grab something from the grocery store, and I'm in the parking lot with my other two kids, and I go on my phone, and I say, look, I'm not playing video games. I'm not checking TikTok or Instagram. I'm actually paying the grocery bill. And then I'm booking your dental appointments. So, we can explain to them that, my screen time right now is this is what I'm doing. I'm doing my adult behaviors. I'm doing my parental behaviors. I'm doing maybe healthy tech. I'm not zoning out, like I said, playing video game or on social media. So I think that's one, is we don't have to be perfect all the time, but we also have to role model certain parameters. So, I call for what's called house rules. In terms of kind of some basic rules for the family. And I wonder if I can pull them up here. Let's see. I had them loaded, or I think Manvinder she was kind enough to say she could post them up here. Let me try to share my screen again. I'm pretty sure I have them. Aha, here they are. Yeah, here we go. So these house rules create screen-free areas. It could be the kitchen table, the car is a good place not to have screens because you don't want them driving anyway. Bedrooms, screen-free time, so meal times, homework, reading before bed. Put a family charging station in an open area like the kitchen. Turn off screens when they're not being used. Including background TV, shut Wi-Fi off. Notifications, I think, are really important to shut off. Bedtime, we want to avoid that blue light for 2 hours before bedtime. Take a digital day off. And I think really importantly, forgive yourself if you fall off the tech, a healthy diet, and it's okay. It's part of life, just like food. We fall off and we forgive ourselves and we get back on. So having some basic house rules and trying to stick with them are really, I think, important parts of our role modeling behaviors.
So, Dr. Kang, there's been a question here, which I think you have answered, but I just want to read the question just in case there's something else you wanted to add to it. And this is Kulvinder saying, he or she is saying, Dr. Kang, some of this should apply to grown people as well who don't have a balance with their phones. Waking up and sleeping with them, what techniques may help? Well, what techniques may apply to them?
Right. So, sorry, say that question again. I was just typing something in the chat as well. Go ahead.
It said some of the care should apply to grown people as well, because you don't have a balance with their phones, and they're waking up and sleeping up with them. Right.
Yes. Oh my goodness. So, there's a lot in there in terms of so there's also the electromagnetic field, right? So that's why we want to sleep with our phone in airplane mode or off completely, and because otherwise we're exposing ourselves to EMF, and now there's a lot of conversation about 5G. And I can't say that we have enough data to say exactly what's happening. But that's one recommendation, is to just shut it off. The other thing is I have blue light glasses here, and I don't know if other people use them, but again, not a lot of information on exactly which percentage filter or what you need, but trying to block some of that blue light, especially at night, is quite helpful. And then when you wake up and when you go to bed checking your phone, or you wake up checking your phone, what you're doing is you're triggering what's called a stress response in your body right away. You're that freeze, fight, or flight. So you're waking up and you're entering that sympathetic nervous system that's fueled with adrenaline and cortisol. Is super stressful. And you're turning that on, and now it's on all day long. And then you're going to bed with that on. And that's why it's so important to have, if we think of Sikhi rituals, where you actually wake up and you do bhads and you go to bed after you've quieted the mind. And these ancient wisdom, I think, is there's a real correlation with science, that when we do practice these traditions. There's a reason behind it, and how we go to sleep and how we wake up. These are key parameters of our health, and I don't think that we've identified that enough. But I think again, we just like we teach our children how to eat, we have to teach them even how to go to bed and how to wake up. Because of sleep deprivation, first of all, they're too busy and too scheduled, and then when even they're able to sleep, so many of my patients tell me they can't fall asleep. They're so wired, and their phones have been they've been looking at the blue light, or they're just so overstimulated, and they're checking social media, and then they think they're going to fall asleep. So even the very basics we have to get back to.
We're going to, I have two questions, Dr. Kang, for you, which have come in, and then we'll try and wrap this up by noon. So this one is, what are your thoughts on video games and how to go about navigating that in the kids' lives as well as their peers, because all their peers are playing as well. That, Dr. Kang, is really what I have I've heard this, because parents are saying, yes, they're playing video games with their friends all day, but I know all their friends, I can hear their conversation, and I'm good with it.
Mm-hmm. Right. And I think in the pandemic, we all relied on video games a bit more. My son certainly did play more video games. But again, video games aren't all the same. So I think there's healthier video games. So I think video games that are more social, you want to favor those as opposed to first-person shooter games where your child is not interacting with anyone, just the screen. Whereas with my sons, I've guided them towards sports games like NHL or hockey or FIFA or soccer. So first, nonviolent is one general guideline instead of the violent shooter games. And then second is social. So now they're interacting with their cousins and friends versus isolated. And then in that social, actually, kids often can either interact with strangers or people they know. So that's the third part. Is the social part is people so that you're forming bonds as opposed to strangers. And I think that there's been a lot of benefit. I've seen my kids connecting with their cousins in England or Canada across, and they've managed to maintain those relationships. The other thing that we know about gaming is there's something called divergent play and convergent play. So I talked a lot about this in my first book and my research, where divergent play is like Lego. It's open-ended. It's actually really good for our brain. So old school Lego, where you're just building something and it's you're in control, you're the leader. That actually develops this part of our brain, the frontal cortex. So some games like Minecraft are like that. They're very creative versus what we call convergent, where it's, let's say, like a slot machine. There's not a lot of creativity. You're just pressing a button, and they're highly addictive. Something like Candy Crush is a very addictive game. Even a lot of seniors are playing it. So it's not about the gaming. Again, it's the type of game and understanding all those ingredients. And then I have to say there's some basic even things like posture. So if you look at the gaming posture, I have a screen I'm going to show you because I think it's really worth looking at. One moment here. There's a gaming posture that we see, and it's, hold on once, I have it right here. Right there, look at that. So this is not a healthy posture for our bodies to be in. It's like we're in a cave, and our nervous system is like, why are you crouched in a cave? Is there a predator? Is there a hurricane? And it'll fire a stress response just based on prolonged sitting and that prolonged poor posture. So there's a lot of hidden stressors, that we haven't even, there's so many layers to it. But so again, there's things we can do if your kid's a gamer and get them to stand up, have a standing desk or put some textbooks on and say, okay, you can't, we're going to limit how long you're sitting for. You have to stand up. drinking water instead of sugary drinks and junk food, which often goes with it. Picking games that are social and with those categories, and even stretching your back afterwards. All of these things can help. Because it is part of many kids' lives, and I don't think it's realistic to think it's not going to happen. But we want to guide them to do it in a healthy way.
That's great. I mean, because you've given us some tangible things to work with and what we can do with. I think we don't. It doesn't come naturally to us.
You were listening to SikhCast by Sikh Research Institute, illuminating every path.